What up, cucks? It's the hater once again, and I wanted to do a video about a topic that I think is extremely important. Now, I'm not gonna take the topic more seriously than I need to because fundamentally this is a comedy channel, motherfucks. But the topic at hand today is racism in wrestling. Now, before I begin my discussion on the topic, I want to point out a couple of things. Number one, by no means is the hater some sort of SJW type that points at racism anywhere when it doesn't exist. I'm not that dude, so don't come at me with that. I mean, come at me with that if you want, but I can give a shit. I know it's not true. Two, I'm talking about a very specific kind of racism here. I'm not talking about kayfabe racism. I'm talking about real life racism, right? And the consequences of it, not only for society, but for the WWE as a company, right? So what I mean by that is this. I'm not going to be one that like says, oh, Crime Time was a racially stereotypical gimmick. I don't give a fuck about that. I think that's great. I think racial stereotypes in wrestling are like very, very useful because they kind of give the characters life, right? And a lot of times the character becomes about overcoming that racial stereotype. Like just like Eddie Guerrero, every gimmick he had was a racial stereotype, but it gave us fun moments. And everybody that watched knew this was like a tongue-in-cheek type situation, right? Nation of Domination is literally like black militant, black supremacist, like as a group, right? But who cares? Like, I'm not black, I'm white, but I love the Nation of Domination because I'm like, this is an interesting concept, right? Even the New Day, before they became the Goofs, like when they were first gonna be like, I can't believe people even said this seriously. They're like, the New Day should be the new Nation of Domination. Have you fucking lost your mind? Like Xavier Woods, actually, he's the only one that would fit there because he was doing that intellectual gimmick, right, as a manager almost. But it's like Kofi Kingston, like really, you know what I mean? Like Big E, really? Like it's like they're not Farouk, they're not Mark Henry, they're not D'Lo, they're not even Godfather, they're sure as shit are not The Rock. So it's like you have to like kind of like know your limits when you make these groups, but nevertheless, the points are what the points are, right? The racism that I'm talking about here is the actual racism that happens with the way that wrestlers are treated, right? The underpinnings of the push, if you will, right? So, WWE and NXT historically hires young guys, right? Like they keep an eye out for young talent. That's the entire premise of Tough Enough. That's the entire premise of the Performance Center and all these other things, right? The Performance Center, by the nature of its name and its purpose, its raison d'être, if you will, right? The entire philosophy of it is that we're gonna get people that don't really know anything about wrestling and we're gonna craft them into wrestlers, right? We don't need to go find the next Kevin Owens who like at 32 is gonna join and like hopefully have like a good few years in him, right? No, that's not their business model. Their business model now is we're gonna get Javon Evans or whatever his name is, right? Who's like 18, and we're gonna hope that we get a star. And if we don't, we don't. But if we get 10 Javon Evanses, right, then one of them might be a star, right? That's the entire premise of a lot of wrestlers that, in my opinion, have had great potential. Obviously Patrick Clark, also known as the Velveteen Dream, is my personal, like my biggest missed opportunity. But even WCW back in the day, they would hire like remember that time like just during the last few months of WCW when they got like Chuck Palumbo, Sean O'Hare, Jindrak, like all these dudes who were like 6'5", 280, looked like beasts, good looking guys, athletic and young. Like that's like what wrestling is supposed to be. You find these guys, then you teach them the bullshit of wrestling, right? But you have to like kind of recruit heavily from a certain subset of the population that fits these parameters, right? You have to be big, you have to be strong, you have to be good looking, right? So that's the whole idea. It doesn't matter if you're like an all-state champion in wrestling, right? Like that's not gonna get you over, right? Nobody gives a fuck about that. I'm like, even Kurt Angle, people go, but Kurt Angle went over. Yeah, Kurt Angle's like one of the most charismatic guys of all time. Same thing with Gable. Like all these dudes that are athletes and are getting over have unbelievable charisma. Even Brock Lesnar, because people use that as an example. Like Brock Lesnar has like insane presence. Like you look at him, you're like, fuck. You stop what you're doing, and you're like, fuck. Look at this guy. You don't get that same reaction when you get like I don't know, Trick Williams or Nathan Frazier. I keep using these guys as examples, but the racism that I'm talking about is the way that wrestlers are treated after they are signed, right? There's these almost like these implicit biases, right? So like you can sign like the Hardy Boys, let's say, right? At age like 18 or 19 or whatever the fuck, like really young, and it's like the Hardy Boys, this is the Attitude Era, it's a little bit different, and they definitely got themselves over big time, no doubt about it. They're charismatic, they're good-looking guys, like, they have a lot of the attributes, and they're kind of big, too. They're both, like, 6'1", 6'2". They're not cruiserweights, right? So it's like they were able to get over, but they also needed that opportunity, right? And it didn't come easy, you know, like they had to earn it with the TLC matches and things like that, right? But even that, the opportunity to be a TLC was something that had to be given to them, right? Nowadays, today's wrestlers and today's wrestling funnel, if you will, is just like, it's a very top-loaded funnel, right? So they'll hire like 100 dudes, and then they'll be surprised when like 80 of those dudes get fired, right? So it's like, and I've noticed that a lot of the black wrestlers, right, that they hire, it's like, it's almost like they're trying to hire black wrestlers to be jobbers, right? That's the idea. Like, for example, why the fuck is Will Hobbs rotting away in AEW, but Ethan Page, who is worse than him in basically every way, except for maybe appearance, but it doesn't, but even in appearance, like obviously like Ethan Page is a better looking guy. I think most people would agree in terms of like aesthetically pleasing, and like girls are probably gonna like him more than Will Hobbs. But Will Hobbs has a better look, right? He has a better like presentation than anybody else, but he's rotting out there. I believe it's because WWE, whether explicitly or implicitly, tries to just to hire black guys to be jobbers, right? To be mid-carders and jobbers, right? So it's like, you know, there are a few exceptions. Like Velveteen Dream is a great example, right? Because this guy had it all, motherfucks. He was young as fuck, good-looking kid, clearly in incredible shape, great in the ring, charisma up the ass, right? Like mic skills, presentation, hard work. He had everything, motherfucks. He had it all, right? And he was getting a push, but then like that whole shit got derailed, right? But the idea is, why don't we ever see like a black Enzo Amore, right? Why don't we ever see like a black, I don't know, Drew McIntyre, right? Like, I guess Lashley is like the closest thing because he's like a big, you know, believable guy, but Lashley is obviously an exception to the rule. Lashley is like, holy shit, you know, this guy's like, he's like a Brock Lesnar. He's like on that level, but he's not treated like he's on that level. And he's not exactly on the Brock Lesnar level because, quite frankly, I think Lashley is like one of those people that's like a really nice guy, like in real life. And Brock Lesnar clearly isn't. And I think that comes off, right? So it's like Lashley as a heel, remember when Lashley was like an arrogant heel as part of the Hurt Business? It's like he was the one that didn't fit in. You know what I'm saying? Like MVP fits in perfectly, but it's like you know Lashley's like a nice guy, you know? So like Brock Lesnar though, if he fit into that group, you would have no problems thinking like, oh, Lesnar's a heel? Like of course he's a heel, right? But the idea that I'm trying to put forward here is that there's these implicit biases. Again, I'm not talking about like, oh, like, you know, you sign a Japanese guy and he's going to do a lot of kicks and, you know, taekwondo and karate and all this other shit. No one's saying that, like, or a Korean wrestler or whatever, right? It doesn't matter. The point I'm trying to make is like, why does it always have to be like that, right? I get it. You know, you can fit a stereotype, and if the stereotype is over the top and goofy, like Kai and Tai when they had like the dubbed over voices, that was hilarious. But if the stereotype is you're just that character, right? You imagine if every white wrestler was just like a trailer park guy, right? You know, then Stone Cold wouldn't feel as unique, right? Because Stone Cold is basically this like trailer trash, like redneck, right? And you're like, if every other white guy, like if Val Venus was also a trailer trash redneck, then that's what would happen, right? But it just seems to me, I'm not talking about all the black characters have like a dancing gimmick. That's like whatever. That's like a stereotype. That's fine. If you want to give all white characters like a beer drinking gimmick, you know, and you think that's gonna get them over, go ahead. It's not gonna get them over though. But the idea is, why is it that every black wrestler, and here's the thing, right? I'm not one of those people that thinks like, well, Montez Ford needs to get a push. No, like Montez Ford sucks, you know, just because he happens to be a black wrestler doesn't mean that he deserves a push. The idea is not why is Montez Ford not getting a push? The argument should be, why isn't Lashley getting a push? And why haven't they fucking signed Will Hobbs and given him a push, right? These people can become huge stars. Montez Ford is never going to become a huge star. There's and it works both ways, right? It works both ways. Like if you are like some of the worst wrestlers in the company right now, in my opinion, the worst wrestler in WWE right now, the least entertaining guy is probably Angelo Dawkins, right? Like this guy offers nothing. Like there's nothing about him that's good. He's not exceptionally athletic. He's not exceptionally in good shape. He's not good looking. He's got nothing, right? Whereas Montez Ford, even though I don't think he's anything special, he's a good looking guy. Like he's got certain attributes. Like he's in great shape. You know, I mean, he's got like a little bit of gyno, I think, but you know, he's in great shape and everything, right? So it's like, why isn't there basically a male version of Bianca Belair, right? what, like, there's a Bianca Belair, she can be compared to like Charlotte or Becky Lynch, but why isn't there a black guy version or any other kind of version that, aside from like white person, right? Why isn't there like a Japanese guy whose gimmick is he has a gimmick, right? Like, I understand that Nakamura cannot do a gimmick because he's never had one, because in Japan they don't have gimmicks, they just have like these, kind of like, innocuous like personality traits, like, oh, Nakamura is eccentric, so like here he's the artist, like, but you need a gimmick, right? I would love to see a Hispanic wrestler, right? That's why Del Rio is a great example, right? Because Del Rio was a Mexican wrestler who finally was not burdened with the gimmick of, luchador, right? Roman Reigns is a Samoan wrestler who finally was not burdened with the gimmick of he's a Samoan, right? Same thing with Yokozuna, same thing with The Rock. They had other distinct gimmicks, and they were able to get over and become world champion, right? The same thing should be applied to other people, right? And, honestly, when I first started this video, I was thinking more about how so many black wrestlers are just kind of limited to the mid-card by the way that they're booked. But now that I think about it, the same thing can be said about, Hispanic wrestlers and Asian wrestlers, right? And that might even be a bigger, crime against wrestling, because Japan and Mexico specifically have very, very big wrestling cultures, right? So it's like they produce a lot of these wrestlers that are talented, right? But it's like WWE seems to only want to sign the ones that kind of fit their paradigm of what a Mexican or an Asian or a black wrestler should be on WWE, right? So in other words, instead of hiring, I don't know, what's his name? Judas Messias, right? Who's a big guy, at least compared to like most people. He's not big compared to Abyss. Like in TNA, they put him against Abyss. He looked like tiny, but like, instead of hiring like Judas Messias, right? Or some of these other guys that they have in like, Lucha Underground, like the guy that was champion who would do the spear. I don't know if that was Judas Messias or not, because he wore a mask in this one. He had a different name. Whatever, like Mil Muertes. Let me see. Is Mil Muertes Judas Messias? But like that guy, for example, that guy was just like a fucking hoss, or at least there he looked like it, right? Mil Muertes, I think it was him. Mil Muertes, yeah, he is Judas Messias. So hire Mil Muertes, right? And make him, you can even put a mask on him, right? But don't make him this high flyer, right? He was just a dude who was like spearing motherfuckers and doing like cool moves, because he was a bigger guy, right? Hire these other types of Mexican wrestlers the same way they hired Del Rio, and then give him a gimmick, right? But don't hire luchadors that wrestle like Andrade and be like, oh, Andrade's a good-looking guy, so we're going to put sunglasses on him and have him cut promos in broken English, and then everyone's surprised why he's not over, right? And the same thing, it's not even a race thing, it's like the same thing happened with like, with anyone that's not like traditional white. Like if you're not like from America, Canada, or maybe like, Anglophone Europe. Like if you look at Miro, for example, he's a white dude. I know that might shock some of you, Bulgarians are white, right? Like Miro is like a white dude, but they're like, all right, here, you're kind of like off-white, so we're going to give you like, the brown guy finisher, the camel clutch, and we're going to wish you the best once this doesn't get over anymore, right? But it's like, look at the guy that you've hired. Like Miro is an athlete. He's a freak of nature. It's like he has almost Brock Lesnar levels of physical attributes, and it's like you didn't take advantage of this guy because you had to pigeonhole him as something else, right? Same thing with Del Rio and other wrestlers that haven't gotten this, right? Like, can they just fucking one time just hire a Japanese wrestler that's not skinny fat? Like, hire one that's in good shape. Like, every Japanese wrestler they hire looks like shit. Nakamura, Hideo Itami. Like, when I first saw Hideo Itami, I had heard about how great Kenta was, and I see him, I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, could you imagine this guy against Kane? Like, this guy's supposed to be like the next big thing. Like, this is like someone that Kane would squash as like the guest tag team partner of Kai and Tai, right? But hire, like, they got big dudes in Japan too, motherfucks. But luckily, it seems like there's been some sort of move towards this. That's why we have like Obafemi and some of these guys that like have some capacity to be more than just mid-card jobbers. Like, I mean, I think they're gonna end up being mid-card jobbers anyways. But the biggest crime here is obviously like the people that I just said, Mil Muertes. And when I say Mil Muertes, I'm not talking about like fucking Judas Messias, that specific guy, or Mil Muertes, Judas Messias in a mask. I'm talking about that archetype, right? Like Del Rio Del Rio is a luchador because, he used to wear a mask and wrestle in Mexico, but he's different, right? He's not going to do a springboard move. Del Rio is like 6'5", and like 265 pounds. Like, he's going to wrestle closer to like a Randy Orton than he is to a Rey Mysterio, right? And look how successful he was despite his short tenure, right? You need people that are unique, and for some reason, everyone that's unique, like comes from America, is white, comes from Canada, is white, or comes from Europe and is white. Like everybody else, every other race, it's like they're like, we need a new Mexican wrestler. Who's the new luchador that they're pushing in Mexico? Let's hire him. Oh, we need a new Japanese wrestler. Okay, who's like the Japanese wrestler that everyone's freaking out about, right? They need a new ROH wrestler. Who's the new ROH jobber who looks like shit that we're gonna hire? Hire fucking Will Hobbs. Hire that black dude from fucking from MLW. Hell, like I went to an indie show in the East Coast. I was down in Maryland, and there was this dude there. I forget his first name, but it was something Kane. It was like Titus Kane or something. I don't remember, right? There's this big black guy, right? They had a lot of big dudes in this indie show, right? And this guy he had some charisma. I mean, in a small crowd, but like, it's like, why don't you hire him? You know what I mean? Like, hire him, make him a star. Make him the next Lashley. They tried with like Titus. And to be fair, they've tried and they've failed with a few people. But it's like a great example would be Darren Young, right? Like Darren Young was like a big guy. He was handsome. He happened to be gay, so that probably would have, been good PR. But it's like he had some attributes. And like when he went with Bob Backlund, I was like, finally, maybe we're gonna see like a black guy reach some sort of height in WWE, because like everyone is so limited, right? And like of course, there's black wrestlers that have had tremendous success. Kofi Kingston is an example. Mark Henry is an example. And then there's other lesser wrestlers that have had less success, like Farouk, and Lashley obviously has had great success. Like Bianca Belair is probably the most successful one. So there are people that are capable of doing it, obviously, right? But the idea is that the racism that is inherently baked into wrestling, I feel like, prevents this from being a reality, right? So it's like Oba Femi might be like as charismatic as The Rock. I mean, let's be real, that's obviously impossible, but like he might be very charismatic, but they're gonna pigeonhole him into like an Omos role, right? And then people are gonna be like, I can't believe that he became the next Omos. He will become the next Omos. Like, people think that Trick Williams is gonna become the next Booker T. Trick Williams is not gonna become the next Booker T, motherfuckers. Trick Williams is gonna become the next like MVP. Like that's his ceiling, So and that's his ceiling not because he's black. That's just because Booker T is obviously black. That's his ceiling because that's his ceiling, right? Like he could improve, he could prove me wrong. He's got like a better physique than MVP ever had, so like anything's possible. But he also doesn't have like 1/8 of the charisma of MVP. So what I'm getting at here is this, right? And you know what? The more I talk about this, it isn't even about race, guys. It's about just making good wrestling decisions, right? The fact of the matter is that the same thing can be said about white guys. Like the fact that Nathan Frazier has a job in this company, and that like there's people like fucking let's see, well, obviously Nathan Frazier is the best example, but like pretty much everyone that was ever in 205 Live, fucking Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, these guys who've never really drawn a dime, the fact that they have a job, and like Alexander Hammerstone, who could be the next Brock Lesnar, is in TNA, I think speaks volumes, right? So the idea is you gotta hire people with potential. You can't just hire 100 ricochets and then be like, oh, why didn't Ricochet become world champion? Because Ricochet's fucking Ricochet, right? For the same reason that S.A. Rios didn't become world champion, right? It's just the same thing, right? So now you perhaps see what I'm saying, right? Every breakout tournament, there's just like a random ass young black guy who's happy to be there, who has no gimmick, right? Like that fucking ACH, whatever the fuck they called him before he quit. Javon Evans, fucking Carmelo Hayes for a while, right? Just like a young black guy that they're gonna try to push, and it's like in the end, Carmelo Hayes is gonna go to the main roster, and then you look at him and you're like, oh, this guy's fucking tiny. It's like you have him next to Randy Orton, and Randy Orton is manhandling him the same way he would manhandle those two Indian guys that would hang out with Jinder Mahal. I forget their names. And like, you remember those guys? He would just grab them and throw them like they're nothing. He did the same thing with Carmelo Hayes. It's just not believable, right? Because it's like he's a small guy compared to Randy Orton, who like is like a foot taller than him, looks like twice his size, would fucking beat the shit out of him if he wanted to. Randy Orton just grabs him and throws him like he's a nobody. That's the former NXT champion, right? And the same thing with like Adam Cole and everybody else that's small. You need believable people to have believable matches, right? And in my opinion, they heavily recruit like the mid-card jobbers from like black wrestlers and luchadors, right? There aren't enough Asian wrestlers to make a point about that yet, but there aren't enough wrestlers that aren't white getting over, right? This would be good. But the problem is because the pool has been sullied by jobbers, right? Because they keep hiring them for jobber positions. Then it's like you find yourself being in the shoes of Tony Khan, and you're like, "Fuck, we need a new guy, right?" The whole point is like he needs to be the first African American AEW champion, so we can show that we're progressive. And it's like you fucking had Will Hobbs there for years, and you choose the fucking cruiserweight jobber from Hit Row. Like, here's what should have happened. Like Hit Row guy Swerve Strickland wins some meaningless match. Powerhouse Hobbs comes out, hits the world's strongest slam. They partner him up with Mark Henry, and it's a wrap. The next match is like he just follows like the Mark Henry formula, right? Where all of a sudden he's serious, just like that. Remember when Mark Henry got his push? I'm gonna make a video on that. But it should be like that, motherfucks. It should be like that. And that being said, this has been your video explaining the racism in wrestling and the fact that it needs to change. You know what I'm saying? I don't know how, but the answer is very simple. Hire better wrestlers to represent different races better, right? So that when I see like, you know, some new black wrestler, it's not always like someone that's destined to be a jobber. In other words, give me more Lashley and Powerhouse Hobbs and give me less fucking Cedric Alexander. You know, and I like Cedric Alexander, but it is what it is. Cucks.